I think about this a lot, especially now that it's been a few years and we've moved completely out of that county. My name is Mike. This happened back in 2023 when my fiancé and I bought our first house together. We're both in our mid-20s. And honestly, in this economy, we just felt lucky to find a small 2-story starter home in a decent suburban town just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. It was a regular, quiet street, cheap wooden fences, people mowing their lawns on Saturdays, kids riding bikes, standard stuff. Our house wasn't anything fancy, but we were excited. The neighbors on our right were an older retired couple who brought us cookies the day we moved in. The guy across the street was cool too. He waved whenever he was out working on his truck. But the house on our left was a different story. For the first week or so, we didn't see anyone come or go. There was a silver sedan always parked in the driveway, but the blinds were completely shut, day and night. It wasn't overgrown or abandoned. Looking, the lawn was cut, it just felt totally dead. Then, around week 2, we noticed him. My fiancée, Chloe, and I were bringing bags of groceries in from my car on a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining a little bit, so we were moving fast. As I was grabbing the last 2 bags from the trunk, Chloe nudged my arm and muttered something about the house next door. I looked over, and someone was standing behind the sheer curtains of their front living room window. It was a man, just standing there, completely still, watching us. The second he realized I was looking back at him, he stepped sideways into the shadows and disappeared. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured he was just an awkward guy or maybe a bit nosy. New neighbors moving in is always gossip material in small subdivisions, but then it kept happening. I work an early shift at a logistics company down the highway, so I'm usually out the door by 6:15 a.m. Almost every morning when I walked out to my car, I'd look over out of habit, and I'd see the silhouette of his head in that same window. Chloe told me she started noticing him too. She works from home as a graphic designer, and she said that whenever she went down the driveway to check the mail around 2 p.m., she could feel eyes on her. Once, she looked up and saw him peering down from an upstairs window. He never waved, never smiled, and always backed away the instant we caught him. It was getting annoying, but it wasn't illegal to look out your own window, so we just joked about our creepy neighbor to pass the time. But things changed on a Thursday night in late November. It was right around midnight, and I was brushed up and getting ready for bed. Our master bedroom is on the 2nd floor, and the side window faces directly toward the side of his house. There's maybe 20 feet of space between our exterior walls. I went to pull our blinds down for the night, and I happened to glance across. His upstairs window was directly opposite ours. His blinds were open just a few inches, and he was standing there, in the dark, staring straight into our bedroom. I froze for a second, just looking at him. Because it was pitch black in his room, I couldn't see his face, just the outline of his figure. But what made my stomach drop was that he didn't hide this time. Usually, he'd jump back. This time, he just stayed there, perfectly still, looking right at me. I quickly pulled our blinds shut and told Chloe. We made sure all the downstairs windows were locked before we went to sleep, but I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about how long he'd been standing there before I noticed him. The next day, I decided to do a little digging. I asked the older couple on our right about the guy in the silver car. The wife, Linda, looked a little uncomfortable. She told me his name was Arthur and that he lived there for about 4 years. She said he used to be normal, but after his mother passed away a couple of years ago, he became a total recluse. She casually mentioned that the previous owners of our house, a young college couple renting the place, had broken their lease early and moved out suddenly over the summer. Linda said she didn't know why they left, but looking back, that should have bothered me a lot more than it did. A few days later, Chloe was cleaning the guest bedroom on the 1st floor. It's a small room we mostly used for storage and her extra art supplies. The window in that room looks out at the narrow side yard separating our properties, right where our AC unit sits. She called my name, her voice sounding kind of flat and weird. Not screaming, just confused. I walked into the room and she was standing by the window, pointing down at the sill outside. I leaned over and looked through the glass. There was a small, plastic garden gnome sitting on our exterior windowsill, facing inside. It was dusty, like it had been sitting in someone's yard for years. We didn't own any garden gnomes. "Did you put that there?" she asked. "No," I said. "Maybe it fell or something." But it hadn't fallen. It was placed precisely in the center of the sill, facing the glass. I went outside, picked it up, and threw it in the trash can by the garage. I figured Arthur was just playing some weird passive-aggressive neighbor prank because our lawnmower had been loud or something. I felt kind of embarrassed for letting it creep me out, so I tried to just forget it. The tipping point happened the following weekend. I was downstairs in the kitchen around 10:30 p.m. making some tea because I had a bad cold and couldn't stop coughing. Chloe was already asleep upstairs. The kitchen has a sliding glass door that leads out to our back patio. While I was waiting for the water to boil, the house was completely quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard a faint, distinct sound from the backyard. Clack. It sounded like wood hitting wood, like someone dropping a piece of firewood or stepping on a loose plank on the deck. I didn't turn on the back porch light. Instead, I stood in the dark kitchen and crept up to the sliding glass door, peeking through the vertical blinds. Our backyard is pretty dark because the neighborhood streetlights don't reach back there, but there was enough moonlight to see the outline of our cheap wooden fence. Arthur was standing in our backyard. He was just inside our property line, standing right next to our small wooden shed. He wasn't moving. He didn't have a flashlight. He was just standing there in a heavy winter coat, staring at the back of our house. I just stared at him for a second, my brain trying to process why my neighbor was in my yard at 10:30 p.m. I felt this sudden, hot surge of anger mixed with anxiety. I grabbed my phone from the counter and turned on the outdoor floodlights. The backyard lit up bright white. Arthur didn't run. He didn't even flinch or cover his eyes from the sudden light. He just stood there, looking directly at the kitchen door. Now that the light was on him, I could see his face clearly for the first time. He looked to be in his late 40s with messy, thinning hair and a completely blank, exhausted expression. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He held my gaze through the glass for what felt like a minute, though it was probably 10 seconds. Then he slowly turned around, walked over to a loose panel in our wooden fence that he'd apparently pried loose, slipped through it, and walked back onto his own property. I called the police right away. 2 officers showed up about 20 minutes later. They were polite, but honestly, they didn't treat it like some big crisis. They took my statement, walked out to the backyard to look at the loose fence panel, and then went over to Arthur's house to knock on his door. They knocked for a solid 5 minutes, but no one answered, and the house stayed completely dark. One of the cops walked back over to my porch and sighed. "Look," he said, "without footage of him actually damaging the fence or threatening you, there's not a whole lot we can do tonight. He's on his own property now. We'll file a report for trespassing and we'll have a cruiser do a few extra passes down the street tonight. If he comes back, call us immediately." They left, telling us to just lock up tight. Needless to say, neither Chloe nor I slept at all. We sat on the living room couch with the TV on mute, watching the front windows until the sun came up. First thing Monday morning, I went to Best Buy and bought 3 Ring cameras. I spent the afternoon mounting one at the front door, one over the garage, and one in the back corner of the house facing the fence line. I wanted proof. I wanted something I could hand to the police to make them take it seriously. For 3 days, the cameras caught nothing but the occasional stray cat or the mailman. Arthur's silver car didn't move. His blinds stayed shut. I started to think that maybe the cops knocking on his door finally scared him off, and he was staying inside out of embarrassment. Then came Thursday night, exactly 1 week after I'd seen him staring into our bedroom. I was at work doing a late inventory count, so I wasn't scheduled to get home until around midnight. Chloe was home alone. Around 10:45 p.m., my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the Ring app. Motion detected at backyard. I unlocked my phone and opened the live feed. The night vision was clear. Arthur was back. He was standing right in the middle of our lawn, looking up at the second-floor windows. But he wasn't just standing there this time. He was pacing back and forth in a tight, frantic circle, pulling at his hair. He looked completely unhinged. I immediately dialed Chloe's number while trying to pull up my truck's GPS navigation. It rang 3 times before she picked up. Her voice was trembling. "Mike, he's outside," she whispered. I heard something tapping on the living room glass downstairs. "I know, I see him on the camera," I said, my chest tightening up. "Listen to me. Go upstairs into the bathroom, lock the door, and call 911 right now. I'm leaving work. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Okay, she gasped. I heard her footsteps hurrying up the stairs. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat, slammed my truck into drive, and tore out of the warehouse parking lot. The drive home was a blur of adrenaline. I kept my phone on speaker, listening to Chloe talking to the 911 dispatcher. She was terrified, crying quietly in the dark bathroom. As I pulled onto our street, I saw the flashing blue lights of 2 police cruisers already parked outside our house. They'd actually beaten me there. I jumped out of my truck, leaving the door wide open, and ran up the driveway. Chloe was already coming out the front door, wrapped in a blanket, escorted by an officer. I ran over and hugged her. She was shaking, but she was physically fine. "Where is he?" I asked the sergeant, standing by the porch. "Did you get him?" "We didn't find anyone in the yard, son," the sergeant said, adjusting his belt. "But your wife said he was trying to get in through the side." I walked around the side of the house with 2 of the officers, pointing my phone flashlight at the ground. When we got to the guest bedroom window, the one where the gnome had been placed, my breath caught in my throat. The screen had been neatly sliced open with a razor blade. The window itself was unlocked. We must have missed it when we checked the locks days earlier. And it was slid open about 2 inches. Arthur had been trying to climb inside while my fiancée was home alone. The police immediately stormed over to Arthur's house. This time, they didn't just knock gently. They pounded on the door and demanded he come out. When there was no response, and given the attempted break-in next door, they forced entry through the front door. Chloe and I stood in our driveway, watching them go in with flashlights drawn. About 10 minutes later, one of the investigators walked out, looking pale and rubbing the back of his neck. He walked over to us and asked if we could step away from the house for a minute to talk. "We didn't find him," the investigator said quietly. "The house is empty, but you need to see what we found upstairs." He took us inside Arthur's house, leading us up the stairs. The place smelled horribly stale, like old garbage and damp cardboard. He took us into the master bedroom, the room directly opposite ours. The room was completely bare. No bed, no dresser, no clothes. The only thing in the entire room was a single wooden chair placed directly in front of the window, facing our house. Spreads across the floor around the chair were dozens of Polaroid photos. The investigator shone his flashlight down on them. They were all pictures of our house. But they weren't just standard photos. There were close-up pictures of Chloe getting the mail. Pictures of my truck parked in the driveway at 6 a.m. Pictures taken through our kitchen window while we were eating dinner. And then I saw the folders. Stacked neatly against the baseboard were 3 yellow manila folders, labeled with our names and our house address. Inside were pages of handwritten notes on legal pads. He had tracked our exact schedules for the 3 months we'd lived there. He knew what time I left for work, what time Chloe went to the grocery store, what days the trash was picked up, and even what rooms we were in at specific hours of the night. One note from the previous Tuesday just read, 11:42 p.m. They forgot to lock the guest window. I felt physically sick standing in that room. The sheer violation of realizing that every single mundane moment of our new life together had been watched, cataloged, and studied by a man sitting in the dark 20 feet away was overwhelming. The police put out a warrant for Arthur's arrest for stalking and attempted burglary. They impounded his silver car, which was still sitting in the driveway, meaning he had fled on foot into the woods behind the neighborhood before the cops arrived. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. They never caught him. The police ran his financials, but his bank accounts hadn't been touched since that night. They checked local shelters, hospitals, and transit hubs, but Arthur completely vanished off the grid. It's like he just walked into the woods and dissolved into thin air. We put our house on the market the very next week. We didn't care about losing money or breaking our mortgage. We couldn't stay in that house for another single night. We moved into a high-rise apartment complex closer to the city somewhere on the 12th floor, with secure keycard access and 24/7 security guards in the lobby. It's been 3 years now and we're married, but the paranoia never really goes away. Every time I hear a weird noise outside at night or see someone lingering a little too long near a window, my mind goes right back to that empty bedroom next door. I still check the window locks 3 times before bed every single night. I don't think I'll ever stop.